By the time everybody is joining, I'll just give you a brief on the person that I'm interviewing today. He has worked with the New York Times, but I'll explain to you in what capacity. New York Times every year declares 52 places traveler. So I mean, even if you want to apply, you can apply there, and there are like 13,000 applications. You are given a chance to travel to 52 places in a year, and you have to go to each place and write an article from all those places and send it to New York Times, which the New York Times actually publishes. So that was the one thing. So the person I'm going to interview today, that is Sebastian, he has worked with New York Times, and he has traveled to 52 places and written articles from all of them. He has also worked with Condé Nast Traveler and MTV. So that is about his profile. And he also has an Indian connection. I'll tell you why. So he is born to a Colombian mother and an Indian father. So yeah, he also has Indian roots. And when I first saw him, I'm not sure all the people who are joining me now have seen him on Instagram or not. But when I first saw him, when I first read about his profile, the first person that crossed my mind was, it might sound funny, but it was Bunny of Ye Jawani Hai Diwani. But when I read his articles, when I read Sebastian's articles, I realized that this person is far more mature. Because it's not just about traveling कि हाँ चलो घूम लिया और photos खींच लिए, upload कर लिया. It's also about traveling, and it's also about writing it, expressing it in a way that you are conveying clearly to your readers on what you experienced and how you experienced it. It's not about going to India and visiting Taj Mahal. When I talk about him, he came to India and visited Hampi and wrote about it. In a similar fashion, he visited 52 places across the globe and wrote about him. So I'm going to talk to him about different facets of being a travel journalist. What does it take? How did he got this job? All of that. And if you have questions, then please मुझे अभी बता दो, because as you know, I switch off the commenting section before doing the interview. So yeah, you still have time before I talk to him. Anyways, yeah. So I'm just waiting for him to arrive. And I also hope today I also did another session which was with Kanika, and which was on how a consultant turned yogi. It is now uploaded on my page, and I hope you like it, and if you don't, just share your comments. So one is asking, what's the biggest challenge of traveling solo? Okay. Well, Sebastian will obviously answer this question that you are asking, but I'll also suggest you that to know more about his process, go to New York Times page and read his articles. Sebastian Modak is his name. उनके आर्टिकल्स पढ़ सकते हो, और न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स की वेबसाइट पे 10 आर्टिकल तो फ्री में पढ़ने को मिलते हैं, उसके बाद पैसे भरने पड़ते हैं. So he has written about loneliness when you travel solo. He has written about how he had to spend his birthday alone when he was traveling solo. So you'll find it all, but I mean request all of you to just go through the articles that he has written. Yeah, and there he. और अब माफ कर देना, मैं कमेंटिंग सेक्शन ऑफ करने जा रही हूँ. Yeah, I'm super excited. Okay. Oh, hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't believe you that I'm actually doing this interview. And let me take a minute to tell you why. Well, Sebastian, I read your articles on New York Times, and the way you traveled and the way you described how you felt, like how you felt loneliness, to you turning it into solitude, or spending your birthday on your own, to just the year of stranger. That's what you declared 2019 as. Yeah, so all that was really fascinating.
Thank you.
And Sebastian, most people envy you because you have a dream job. But tell us all, what's the part of your work, what's the part of your life that you are most grateful about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been that I've just been able to experience so many different cultures and meet so many different people from around the world and create these very meaningful connections with people all over the world. I think I'm very, very lucky to have had those experiences, and not just in the past year or the past few years in my career, but growing up as well. I grew up moving around my whole life, so I've always felt very lucky and very privileged to have been able to just experience so many different facets of humanity, you know, and different people and different cultures and backgrounds, and
Okay.
yeah, that's probably what I'm most grateful for.
Yeah, and during this COVID-19, when we all are having good family time, you wrote an article saying that how you feel homesick at home. So tell me, like, how has your life changed, and what do you expect now due to COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed. It changed dramatically and very suddenly. I was, I went from being in a different place every week for the course of 2019 to being in lockdown in my apartment.
Yeah,
And I mean, I was looking forward to taking a break and, catching up with my partner and friends and reacquainting myself with the city. I didn't expect it to be such a break.
okay.
But I'm happy that I'm lucky to be healthy and safe, and it's given me the opportunity to explore New York a little bit more and the environment around New York. So I've been going on long bike rides and trying to make the most of it, I guess. But in terms of what it means for the future, I don't think anybody knows. I think everyone, especially within the travel space, is kind of looking at the next person to see what they're going to do. And it's kind of a game of, daring the person to take the first move. Yeah, exactly. There's no real solution. So I think everyone's trying to sort of trial and error, figure it out as we go. But I mean, I'm not planning to get on a plane anytime soon.
Okay, nice. And Sebastian, tell us that what was the brief given to you when you were selected by the New York Times to travel to 52 places? I mean, you can't just Google what are the best things to travel in India and you go to first 3 places. I mean, that's not how it works. So what did the team tell you before you started your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't have anything. I wasn't involved in picking the places on the list. The editors at the New York Times do that. So I got the job, and I didn't even know where I was going when they told me that I was going to be the 52 places traveler. I had some idea of what to expect in terms of the pace and what's the expectations in terms of what I needed to deliver every week, because I was the second person to do this job. Jada Yuan did it last year. So I had that sort of expectation, but yeah, I didn't know where I was going to go until maybe a week after I said yes to the job, and then they gave me the list of places, and then I think I had maybe 2-3 weeks to pack up my bags, and I went to destination number 1 and kept traveling for 52 weeks basically.
But no, did they mention anything about the deliverables, like you have to write certain type of articles, or they expect you to write something of this sort, like any brief on the articles?
Yeah, no, it was much to their credit. I think they allowed me a lot of freedom in terms of the approach I wanted to take and the way that I crafted the narrative. Obviously, I had to submit, I had to file an article every week because I needed something to put in the paper every week. But there was a big multimedia component too, so photography and video and social media was a big part of it too. I was expected to keep up with all of that, which is difficult just because it's its own full-time job really, but also when you're dealing with in remote places without connectivity and things like that, it could be a bit of a headache. But it was kind of, it's a very experimental project in a way. So I think both they and myself were kind of figuring it out as we go. There wasn't really a very set rubric of this is the way it needs to be. It's kind of it was an ongoing process of let's do this week. Let's try doing a more photo-oriented piece the next week. Let's do a video now. So it was a
Okay.
fun thing to be a part of.
But was that the dilemma that where to start from? Because like laymen like us would search on Lonely Planet and look for places to visit, but you are expected to do something which is not written about, not spoken about. So was the first step a difficult one or not really?
Yeah, it was. I mean, definitely felt a lot of pressure. I knew that there were a lot of eyes on the project. A lot of people were waiting to see what this year's 52 Places Traveler would do and what he would write about. I mean, I did look up, things to do and all of that, but honestly, I treated it more as a list of things not to do. If
Okay.
because it's stuff that had already been done, and I thought it was important for me to try to find a new story about a place. Because I mean,
Okay.
some of the places on the 52 places list are sort of new, up and coming destinations, but some of them are very well known already. So it was I kind of felt like if for places that were more well known, it was important for me to find a new angle on a place. So I would just hit the ground. I'd go for long walks, get my bearings.
Okay.
I'd talk to a lot of strangers.
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid to, ask stupid questions. I'd talk to somebody at a bar and I'd just say like, "Hey, I just got here yesterday. I have zero plans. What should I do?"
Okay.
And I think you'd be amazed by how one, forthcoming and open everyone is, but two, how willing people are to give you tips about the places they call home because they have a certain level
Okay.
of pride or
Pride about their own place.
yeah, exactly. So you could be, especially in places that are less well known. So I went to Denmark, but I only spent one night in Copenhagen. I went to Aalborg, which is a much smaller city, not really well known as a tourist destination. So when I talked to people there, I think part of the excitement where people would be like, "What are you doing here? All the tourists go to
Okay.
Copenhagen. What are you doing in this town?" And I tell them, "Well, I'm interested to see what we should do, what I should do." And then they'd be so forthcoming and telling me, "You need to go to this restaurant. You need to go check out this. You need to talk to this person."
Okay.
And so yeah, I depended on that a lot to try to figure out what stories to tell.
Okay. But Sebastian, we all have our own preferences. Like if I go to a new place, I may see I would love to see the landscapes. You might love the food. So what was that one thing that you personally loved looking at or experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I had to kind of separate my own
Your personal
my
yeah.
personal preferences to
Right.
storytelling because I had it was a column, right? So it was 52
Yeah.
50 something stories throughout the year, and I didn't want it to get repetitive. So, I mean, personally, I think
Okay.
my focus is always on the people and the culture of a place, and I think that does come out in stuff that I've covered. But I have like a musical background as well, so I'm always interested in checking out the music
Yeah.
in whatever place. But on this project in particular, I think I had to go out of my comfort zone sometimes to tell the right story. I mean, I was in East Germany in a town called Dessau for the anniversary of the Bauhaus movement, and like that's a big
Okay.
architecture and art thing, which isn't necessarily my field of expertise, but I couldn't talk about this town without talking about all of that. So
Yeah.
I had to put myself out of my. I mean, as a journalist, that's what you have to
Comfort
do,
zone.
right? I had
Yeah.
to learn quickly and tell stories. But I think all of that comes from the same instinct that I have when I travel. Is no matter where I go, even if I'm in New York, I think it's just like admitting how little you know about a place.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
admitting your own ignorance because that's how you're going to open yourself up enough
Openness. Yeah.
to learn something about the place.
Something, yeah. And then when you travel to all these 52 places, did you get any cultural shocks? Because we may not be aware about all the cultures therein. So if you could share any of them.
Yeah, I mean, not to be honest, not really. I
Not really?
felt it.
Okay.
I felt it a little bit when I came back to the States after traveling. A bit of culture shock, but like, I mean, my father's from India, my mother's from Colombia.
Yeah, Colombia.
I moved every 4 years of my life, so I was kind of used to the change. And I also like have never really had a single culture to call my own. So I find it difficult to be shocked by a culture or have culture shock because I have nothing to compare it to. You know, that being said, I mean, there's definitely cultural norms I had to get used to very quickly or learn about very quickly. You know, just things like I can't really think of any examples off the top of my head, but just like I said, like admitting that I didn't know anything, I think led to me learning a lot about, you know, how you're supposed to greet somebody in Uzbekistan, or how, you know, in a lot of parts of sub-Saharan Africa, like you have to have like a whole conversation about your families and how everything is doing before you really ask for the thing that you want to do, you know. And like those are things that I just had to learn on the go. I think I came in with an advantage because of my own sort of background.
Cultural ambiguity,
Exactly, So, but yeah, in terms of culture shock, I mean, I definitely did feel it a bit coming back to the U.S., especially just back to New York. It's just a kind of a shock to the system. But yeah, besides that, not really.
Okay. And Sebastian, in one of your interviews, you mentioned that your threshold to take risk was bigger because you are a man and that you are a tall one. If you were a woman, things would have been different. So tell me that does the gender dynamics come into play when we are a journalist, especially a travel journalist? I mean, when it comes to opportunities also.
Yeah, I think
And how?
100%. I think you only have to look at the year before me, 52 Places Traveler, Jada Yuan, and read her articles and her stories to see the difference. She was concerned with a lot of things that I didn't have to be concerned with, you know, and I think that led to, it was a lot easier for me to talk to strangers and to access some things because I didn't have that fear, you know, I didn't need to be on my guard. So, you know, when a bunch of old Georgian men are like, come get into my car, I want to drive you into the woods and
like
fly you
with
wine, I'm like, yeah, sure, sounds great. If I was a woman traveling alone, I don't think I would do
think
that.
twice.
Yeah, as they should. So I mean, I think I got a lot of questions too when I was traveling, you know, through Instagram. People would see me in whatever place and they'd say, you know, that looks great, but what do you think it would be like to be a woman traveling alone? Or do you think it's safe for a woman traveling alone in such and such a place? And I mean, frankly, I'm just like not qualified to answer that. I think there's plenty of women travel journalists out there who are telling amazing stories about what it's like to travel as a woman, and like I would kind of refer people to those articles because I'm not going to speak for them. But I do think like no matter. I think everyone has their own threshold for risk, and I think it's about discovering what you're comfortable with, which is going to take some trial and error. It means you are going to be uncomfortable in a few moments as you try to figure out what your level of risk-taking is when you're traveling alone. And I think a lot of it comes down to identity, too, and how you're perceived when you're traveling. Because, you know, I got a lot of questions about safety from like American readers and viewers when I was in, you know, rural Mexico, or when I was in Muslim countries like Tunisia or Uzbekistan, and you can see the biases and the prejudices and the preconceptions coming through in those questions. But I felt completely safe there. I mean, in Tunisia, everyone thought I was Tunisian. In Uzbekistan, everyone thought I was Uzbek. The only time I felt unsafe was when I was confronted by some racists in Australia. So it goes to show you, like, it so much depends on identity, and that has to do with race, but also gender, identity, and things like that. So it's just there's no one easy answer. So much goes down to the individual.
So much.
How you decide to navigate it and the risks you decide to take. I took a lot of risks that I probably shouldn't have in my experience of traveling. But
you also written about them.
Yeah, but that's part of the learning process, right? That's how I said, okay, from now on, I'm not going to drive in the middle of the night through snowstorm, because I learned the hard way that was a very bad idea.
Bad
Lucky that
idea, yeah.
that it didn't.
But
It
you are
ended up the way it is.
in a problem, yeah. And Sebastian, during this lockdown period due to COVID-19, we all got a lot of time to just sit at home, introspect, think about our lives and all of that. So now, retrospectively, when you think that how did 2019, I mean, impacted your whole life, is there anything that changed after you went to 52 places alone? And is there anything, any impacts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I left it even more with a greater faith in humanity and people,
Yeah.
and a greater appreciation of the connections we have between us, between cultures, between countries. And then of course coronavirus happened, and out of coronavirus, I think you're seeing, and this is partially because of the people we have in charge of some of these countries, but you're seeing an increase in xenophobia and in kind of this instinct towards isolationism, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's in the very words that we use to talk about coronavirus and self-isolation and things like that. And I think it's easy for a lot of people to say, oh, it's all of our interconnections between countries and how easy it was to travel and everything that got us into this mess. It's why it's such a global pandemic and why it wasn't only limited to China where it started or whatever else. But I also think it's those interconnections that are going to get us out of this too. Like, we need each other,
Okay.
we depend on each other. And I think I saw that more saliently than I've ever seen it before last year, was in just how open and kind and generous people are, no matter where in the world they are, no matter what language they speak. And I think if we forget that in a new post-COVID era of just shutting ourselves inside and not traveling, I think the world's going to be worse off because of it. I think, now that being said, I do think it gives us an opportunity to re-examine how we travel and think about the environmental impact of travel, think about forces like over-tourism and what they're doing to destinations like Venice or places that are just so saturated with tourists, or were before coronavirus. And so I don't know what the future of travel will look like, but I hope this time also
That
gives us
it
a
will be,
chance
yeah.
to make it more sustainable, to reflect on what we might have been doing wrong and take the time to think about how to travel in the future.
Okay, but before COVID-19, when you were traveling across the world, did the question of how to travel or how to do the least damage to the nature, did that question cross your mind, or were you told something about it by the New York Times team or the
Yeah,
publication
no,
that
it
you're working
absolutely.
for?
It definitely, it's, you can't be writing about travel without thinking about these
Thinking
issues.
about, yeah.
I think the biggest source of consistent criticism I got over the course of last
Okay.
year was the size of
Is
my
what's the
carbon
need to
footprint.
travel? Yeah.
Yeah, which completely valid.
Yeah.
I took 88 flights last year. It's a lot of
That's
carbon.
insane. Yeah.
But I mean, I think I'm not telling everyone to go to 52 places in a year. In fact, I probably wouldn't recommend it.
I think most of us
pretty
will be happy
exhausting.
just reading your articles.
Yeah, so I mean, I think part of it is making sure that the message that I'm putting forward in what I'm writing is about sustainable travel, even if my own carbon footprint is, something
A lot.
that's out of control.
Yeah.
But just I mean, I think sustainability is more than your carbon footprint, right? Like, I think the focus of my travel has always been sort of people-to-people interaction.
Yeah.
I'm not really interested in going to the all-inclusive resort and sitting on a beach for a week and then going back home. I'm not really interested in the city-sized cruise ship where you're stopping in port for an hour and then you're on your way again. Those are the kinds of things that I hope we re-examine in terms of why we travel in the first place. And because I think there's, you can't really, it's like apples and oranges to compare the benefits for humanity of meeting new people and having cross-cultural interactions versus the carbon footprint and everything else of travel. But I do think, I mean, there's a great benefit to be gained from travel. I think it breeds more empathy between people. So when the next time you read an article about somewhere across the world where something terrible has happened, or we're talking about war or whatever, you have a little bit more empathy because you can imagine the people that you met living in that world, and you can think about yourself in their shoes, and you can send a WhatsApp to that friend in Siberia and say, hey, what do you think about what's going on? And I think that just leads to a better global society.
Okay. And tell us that, as you mentioned about the articles, so tell us that what are the things or the skill set that one should develop to pursue travel journalism? I mean, I'm not asking about like what one should pack in the bags, but tell us when it comes to writing an article, what one should take care of.
Yeah, I think it can be intimidating, especially when if you're doing something like what I did, where you have such a short, limited and set amount of time to find a story and tell the story and write the piece and take the photographs and everything.
It can be a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah, it can be a lot of pressure. But I think you really do have to go in not knowing what the story is going to be. At least in the terms of like the more open-ended column that I was writing.
Did it scare you initially?
Yeah, very scary. But I think you'll find though that, just as an example, I mean, I had 6 days in Las Vegas alone. You ask anyone who's traveled to Las Vegas, they'll tell you that's way too much time to have in Las Vegas alone unless you're, addicted to gambling or something. But which I am not. I have very little interest in casinos and things like that. And honestly, because of my preconceptions, I was kind of dreading it. It's not my style of travel by any means. And then because I had these preconceptions, I think I just came in with this negativity. It was early on in the 52 places trip, so I don't think I had learned everything that I was going to learn by then. But by the 4th day of 6 days, I was like, I have nothing to say. This is my 5th stop of the trip, and I'm going to call my editor at the New York Times and say, sorry, I don't have a story, because I was like, what is there to say about Las Vegas that hasn't been said? But then the minute I turned off that voice in my head, and I was like, okay, let me just open my eyes, talk to some people. Next thing I know, I'm hanging out with this group of people who live like it's in the they're in the 1950s, they dress in the 50s, they play music from the 50s, they decorate their houses like that, and it was suddenly I was in this time warp into a different Las Vegas, and I found my story with 2 days to go because I had that openness that I entered in.
Okay.
And I think kind of connected to that, I think now more than ever, it's about saying something new. I think travel writing has been it's why, for example, I refuse to use the words authentic, exotic, or ethnic in my writing. Because it's
That's so common.
But it's just been hammered to oblivion. And they've reached the point where these things are meaningless. All it's doing is creating this other that you can talk about, right? Like ethnic food, what the hell does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Yet you see it over and over and over again. Yeah. And I think it's about finding those tropes and actively avoiding them. Really going out of your way, because I think the new generation of travel writers are going to be the people who are really saying something new. And that's why I also think it's so important to, this is a whole other can of worms to open, but it's so important to have diverse voices in travel writing. I think it's long been dominated by, white voices talking from a neo-colonial lens. I mean, India, for example.
Yeah, we need a diverse.
Can you read a single travel article about India that doesn't start by talking about the noise and the chaos and the colors of the streets
and the cows
and the cows on the street? It doesn't exist. It's at a certain point, it just becomes an exercise in the absurd to just be these same tropes over and over again.
Just stereotyping.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes because so much travel writing is rooted in this kind of colonial experience, and I think it's about this new generation of travel writers to just completely dismantle that. And just like it's hard on a micro level to go into a new place with open ears and open eyes and say, I'm just going to bring a new perspective to this and write about what I see. I think it's also hard for the industry as a whole to think about their past and say, okay, what can we do differently moving forward?
Yeah.
Which is why these conversations that are happening around the world now around Black Lives Matter and things like that are so important for every industry, including travel writing.
True. And then just to bring in a fresh perspective, do you or do you not read a lot which is already written about the place? Because you have to know what's already written to, or that's not necessary.
A little bit, I do. I try not to do it too much because then no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you try, some of that is going to bleed into the own narrative that you're forming about a place. But I do think it's important to see what has been said about it. Like I said, for the 52 Places project, I had someone who was helping me back in New York named Laura, who did a lot of research for me before I went into a place. Because just like if I was handling my own logistics along with everything else, I would have no time to do anything else, right? I was just booking flights and hotels and rental cars and all that stuff. So luckily I had some help. But she would also prepare like a document for me with some basic information and like the top sites and things like that and the best restaurants based on what's already out there. And sometimes if I had time, I'd do like a quick tour of all of them just to like get the basics.
Get the vibe or the idea of.
But like I said, it would kind of be my instruction manual, be like, cool, so I don't need to write about this because this has already been done.
Okay.
And especially for something like the 52 Places project, where every place is on the list because of something new that is happening, whether it's a new trend or a new hotel or a new flight route. I just felt it was important to then say something new about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I won't say that I don't read anything about a place because I think it's important to have some base knowledge, but I'll read just enough so that I still am learning every day that I'm in a new place.
Interesting. Sebastian, like from the place I come from, the moment we are born, we gravitate towards a stage in our life where we are settled. We gravitate towards settlement, where we want to be secure, where we want to be with someone and all of that. So tell me that with age, with time, you have traveled a lot all through your life, but now do you subconsciously or in the back of your mind, do you wish to be settled? I mean, to just call some place your home, because as of now you don't feel at home even at your home. Does the time come in a travel journalist life?
I think it will, for sure. I think my partner, who I can see across my apartment right now, would very much like me to say that, to your question, that like, yep, ready. Let's do it now. But I definitely still feel that draw to travel. I mean, I don't think I'll be doing 52 places a year in my future, because I think it's impossible to do that and have a family and things like that. But I think there will come a time where I'll have to sacrifice some of that for another instinct, another urge that I have, which is to put down some roots. But I don't know. My parents often say, or my mom also often says, like, they say that parents are supposed to give you roots and wings. But she's worried that she skipped the roots part, only gave the wings because of how we grew up. Which it's a little cheesy, but there's some truth to that, I think. But no, I do feel like there will be compromises to be made in the future.
And while giving your introduction, I mentioned a movie called Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, which talks about a person who loves traveling, and then at the end he settles down with a girl. And I recommend you that movie.
Okay, I'll check it out. I haven't seen it.
And Sebastian, tell me, now that you have traveled the world and you understood that people are nice everywhere, so has it impacted your view on religion, on God, on spirituality? Again, the question is coming from the place I come from.
Yeah, I haven't been asked that question yet. It's a new one. I think, if anything, it's just given me more respect for the diversity of faith and things like that. It hasn't necessarily given me more faith, per se. I was brought up Catholic. I kind of turned away from it in my teenage years and just never went back. I just never thought it was for me. But I've always had a great respect for spirituality and the other religions. I think there were definitely some moments last year when I was praying to something, but that was more out of desperation than anything else. But no, I think I've seen the way that different thinking and philosophies and religions and everything else coexist, and it's given me some belief that can continue. In a small island in Siberia, I stayed with a man who was the caretaker of the local church, and just on the other side of the hill you can see these ribbons that are tied around trees and things like that that are put there by practitioners of a shamanistic religion that the Buryat indigenous people practice. So to see these juxtapositions and to see people living together like that, it's just like a way that it restores your faith in humanity. But I wouldn't say that I came out of this with like having seen God or something. It wasn't quite as I don't think that. I definitely had some profound experiences, especially in nature in places like Siberia and Norway and New Zealand, when I'd just find myself alone with some beautiful sunset, and that's probably the closest thing to spirituality that I felt.
Okay, and in your travel, you visited a lot of small places, as you also mentioned in your articles. So tell me, when you're traveling to, say, villages where people may have a very different life than yours, how do you keep your privilege or your ego in check? Because many a times you know better than other people. You have seen the bigger world than other people have. So how do you just get along with them, or just make sure that you don't belittle them?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that, because I think maybe I've seen more of the world, but if I'm in a place to learn about that place, that person knows way more than I could ever know, right? About what it's like to live there, what it's like day by day. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about admitting and embracing your own ignorance, in terms of just like, no matter how much I read, no matter how much I travel, this person in this town in Vietnam knows way more about the traditions of food and culture and ways of life and what it's like to live there than I will ever know. So it's about admitting that, like, no, you don't know anything. If anything, you know nothing in this place, within this context, if your goal is to learn about the place. So I think it takes a certain level of humility, which can be difficult, I think, especially I think for newer travelers who, let's say they're like, oh, well, I took, African history courses in college, and I've done all this reading before I came to Senegal, and I've done all these other things. So, I have all these preconceptions. That's cool. That's good. It's good to be informed. But I think if you're there to really learn about a place, you have to put that all. You have to
come with an open mind. Okay.
And just ask questions and admit that no matter how much you think you know within this specific context, whether it's, talking to someone in a bar in Munich or someone in a village outside of Hampi in Karnataka, you don't know anything.
True. And I mentioned this at the starting of the interview as well, that, Sebastian, I hope you know that you have lived a life which people dream of. Like, they want to, travel and get paid for it. Like, they think of this thing for their whole life, and you've already done that. So tell me, what do you dream about now? What do you look forward to? Now I want to achieve this. Is there anything on your...
Yeah, I mean, I think I hope I can keep traveling and writing about travel, though the future seems
Okay.
very uncertain right now, as you can imagine, with travel. I think my goal is to just continue developing my own voice. I think I still have a long way to go. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think voices that recognize the importance of cross-cultural connection, of diversity, of a future where there are more and more people like me who don't really identify with a nationality or with the trends of nationalism or whatever else, which are all on the rise the world over, whether you're talking
Yeah.
about the US or India or wherever else. I think those voices are going to be more and more important. And I think whether it's in the form of more articles or hopefully potentially a book one day or whatever else, I just want to be that voice that I think is needed right now. And I hope I'm not the only one. And I don't think I will be the only one um, who kind of makes that their life work. But for me, at least, I think it's going to be more and more important for younger people, especially growing up, thinking about traveling, for them to be reading things that show why it's so important that we maintain and create connections with people on the other side of the world. Because I think more and more you're going to see the discourse moving in the other direction. Um,
Yeah.
that we need to shut down our borders and talk about other people as the other that we have to be afraid of and whatever
Yeah.
else. And all these trends I just find very worrying in terms of what I've seen and the values that were instilled in me growing up. And I'd like to help whatever little way I can change people's minds about that.
Change people's mind. Yeah. Cool. All the best for that.
Thank
And
you.
and just one request that in future when you resume traveling, please keep writing postcards to your family, to your friends,
Yeah.
because that's a very rare thing. I mean, nowadays people don't write letters. That's a dying art. I mean, and I hope you keep writing them.
Yeah, no, it was one of my favorite, it's probably my only routine throughout the year, and it was one of my favorite things
Yeah.
to do. I think I sent 145 postcards over the course of the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So,
That's a
yeah,
big deal. Yeah.
it's definitely a habit that's going to be hard to break. So I'm sure I'll continue.
Yeah, and in the article that you wrote, I really loved the way you wrote that you were craving for a normalcy, for a routine. I mean, that's so opposite from people who are living a normal life. I mean, they want
Yeah, and
something exciting, and you want
I
something.
never thought I would be the one craving that because, I think I thrive on not having those
Yeah,
routines. But yeah, when your environment's shifting every day and you have no idea what you're going to do when you wake up in the morning, you do try to find some semblance
some resemblance.
of routine. And in my case, it was hunting for postcards and then hunting for post offices and navigating all of that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
great. I have covered most of the questions, and if you have
Okay.
anything else to add, you can.
I think
Or
I've managed to cover everything I
to
wanted to
cover
say
it.
for now.
Yeah, yeah. All I can say is I wish all the best for you. I mean, I hope you have a more meaningful life ahead.
Thank
And
you. Same to you.
thank you so, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
It's fun.
thank you. Yeah, bye.
Okay, bye bye.